We are all here today for the webinar, Configuring and Optimizing DOIs with DataCite in Open Journal Systems. Really excited to have Mary and Mike here for this webinar. And so this session will cover how to configure the OJS DOI plugin and how to optimize your DOI metadata for discoverability. So whether you are already registering DOIs with OJS or whether you're just starting to explore this option, we're here to help you understand how to make the most of the DOI plugin and what DataCite DOIs can do for your organization. So our agenda today, we'll start off with a brief introduction to open journal systems, and then a brief introduction to DataCite and DataCite DOIs. And then we will get into how OJS and DataCite systems can work together. We'll also have plenty of time for Q&A at the end of this session. And so it's my pleasure to introduce our two speakers today. So first we have Mike Nason. Mike is the Open Scholarship and Publishing Librarian at the University of New Brunswick. And he is also an Open Scholarly Infrastructure Advisor with the Public Knowledge Project, or PKP. He is a passionate advocate for collective action, open access, cool hats, as he has today, and advancing the publishing and metadata literacy, as well as dismantling the cultural trappings of professionalism and the principles of open scholarly infrastructure. Mary Hirsch is DataCite's Member Support Manager, and in her role, she is responsible for making sure that DataCite provides exceptional support to all of our members and our community so that they can make the most of DataCite services. And you can always say hi to her at support@datacite.org. And so with that, I think I'm going to hand it over to Mike to get us started.
Awesome. Thank you. I just rewrote my bio to have language about my interest in dismantling professionalism, and I hope that my tone will make it clear why I'm like that. So hi, I'm Mike Nason. I'm going to run through open journal systems and DOI stuff quickly, and then I'll pass things over to Mary. Feel free to put questions wherever you need to put questions if they're in the chat. I can maybe answer some during the gap between the two. So yeah, buckle up. So a quick intro to PKP. I kind of presume most people in the webinar know who PKP are, but if you don't, PKP is a software development and research facility at Simon Fraser University. We conduct research into issues impacting scholarly communication, and we develop free and open source software, otherwise known as FOSS, towards a more diverse, inclusive, and accessible model for scholarly publishing. Since 1998, PKP's mission has been to research, develop, and support open infrastructure to increase quality, diversity, and the reach of scholarly publishing. We have three major software platforms that we develop, all with sort of a common code base at the center of it. We develop open journal systems, OJS, open preprint systems, OPS, and open monograph press, OMP. Geez. Globally, OJS is really broadly used. We know from our own data assembled by Juan Pablo Alperin and other folks who sort of assemble usage data for PKP and OJS, we have over 55,000 active journals worldwide, publishing across 150 countries, and journals publishing in 60 languages. So an enormously popular piece of software, and one that is used all over the globe. PKP is best known for the development of OJS. It is the world's most widely used journal management and publishing system. OJS sort of has three different ways you can think about its utility in this space. One is for authors. So it's a system for authors to submit to a scholarly journal, track their submission through the editorial process, upload revisions, and publish, often open access. So even if you aren't running an open access journal, it's very possible you spent time in OJS submitting your work or receiving feedback from peer review. Secondarily, OJS is also an excellent tool for editors. It's a system for editors to manage their submissions at different stages, track manuscript versions, and manage communications between authors, editors, and reviewers. It's a nice way to sort of have both the bird's eye view of the material coming in or out of your publication, and also keep track of all of the workflows that you have going between editors and section editors and whomever, and a really nice way to sort of have a backlog of all of your communications with editors and authors and so on, so that you can refer to them later. And lastly, OJS also functions as a tool for reviewers. So a system for reviewers to accept or decline peer review requests, see submissions, communicate with editors, and submit peer review materials. OJS is also sort of increasingly embracing this use of being for researchers, this sort of customizable multilingual publication website with built-in indexing, dissemination, and preservation tools. And also because a lot of the data that we record about how OJS is used thanks to beacon data allows people to do research on the nature and scope of scholarly publishing worldwide. So that's extra cool. As I alluded to before, PKP is a global community. If you've ever met with us at one of our PKP sprints that happen sort of all over the globe, it's a really good opportunity to meet other people working with OJS or other PKP software suites and get together for a couple days and work on a couple projects that have concrete effects for the people who are working with the software. PKP software is developed and maintained and sustained by a global community of developers, users, translators, financial contributors, and strategic partners. So lots of people involved and lots of hands on the wheel. PKP provides resources to help software users build their knowledge and enhance scholarly publishing practices. You can get detailed documentation at our documentation hub, and the link is here, PKP Docs. Those are maintained by both PKP staff and people in the community who care about good documentation. And we have a community forum where you can log in and ask and answer questions and request features and share ideas. Our developers spend time on the community forum. So if you need FaceTime with a developer to understand something about what's happening in OJS, you can hop on the community forum and have a conversation. And lastly, PKP has this platform called PKP School. It's a set of online, open, self-paced courses designed to help improve the quality of scholarly publishing around the world. So there's modules on being an editor, there's modules on like authorship and peer review, things on like system administrator work, basically anything that you could look for in sort of learning about PKP and OJS, and also the publishing workflow in general, sort of running a scholarly journal. There's a PKP School module for that. So with all of that out of the way, let's talk quickly about OJS. So out of the box, OJS is a hugely supported piece of open scholarly infrastructure. In fact, it is an example of open scholarly infrastructure. Things will vary a bit depending on the version of OJS you're running. And so I'm going to talk about the version specifics here real quick. If you're leveraging persistent identifiers and other connections to open infrastructure, it's best to stay updated to at least the latest long-term support version, or LTS. And LTS is basically a version that the development team has agreed they will maintain for a long period into the future. Other versions may come out in the interim to sort of have more granular release information or new features or smaller pieces, but that LTS is going to stay supported for a longer time than versions of the software that aren't LTS. So if you're someone who doesn't want to update a ton and you want to have a really stable version of the software, the LTS is the way to go. So here's a quick look at the versions over the last handful of years. We have OJS 3.3.x, that is the current LTS. It's the most recent LTS version. That is a very large install base. It has a big selection of third-party plugins. DOI deposit is done in there by plugin, so it's possible you've been using this and probably you've been using the old form of DOI deposit. And it's going to be flagged for end of life within a year after OJS 3.5 gets its LTS designation. And I'll talk about that in a second. In the middle, there's OJS 3.4. It brought a number of changes to user management and statistics and submission workflows. It's got a bunch of more iterative features about sort of publishing workflows being a little bit more flexible. And all of the DOI management and deposit workflows were overhauled in 3.4 to be a more central managed deposit. And there's like a whole DOI management panel now, as opposed to loading a plugin and handling your DOIs individually. And then there's OJS 3.5. This is the most recent release as of basically this summer. It's going to be the next LTS, but hasn't yet received LTS designation. It's probably a patch or two away. Significant improvements to the publishing workflow, really big UI improvements. It's going to be great, but if you're looking to upgrade, I would probably wait a second until you get the LTS designation. I blacked out 3.4 here. At this point, if you're running 3.3, there is an upgrade path direct to 3.5. I would probably just not worry about upgrading at the moment. And once 3.5 LTS is out, I would move to that. That would be my recommendation. There are PID considerations here. In 3.3, your DOI management is tied to registration agency plugins. It has ROR support and it has ORCID support. 3.4 didn't have ROR support, but it did have ORCID support. And in 3.5, it has all of the new features from 3.4. There's improved ROR integration. In general, there's improved ORCID integration. And we've also updated the PID metadata schemas for better metadata fidelity. So that basically means that the metadata you're pushing is up to date with both the Crossref and DataCite schemas. We're making sure that if there's some metadata that we weren't previously pushing, we are pushing it now. And that's a good reason to stay up to date. The more up to date you are, the more likely it is that you're pushing the most accurate metadata to the registration agencies as possible. So what version should I use? At an absolute minimum, I'd recommend running the latest version of 3.3.x to make sure you've got all the latest patches and security updates. Staying up to date on the LTS version is good practice and will help ensure a stable, secure platform for your journal. Does it matter? That depends. Your experience with the software will be different depending on the version you have installed. Often the trade-off for newer versions of a platform is that you get the best, newest features, but you also need to apply more frequent updates and keep things secure and bug-free. However, if you are running a version of OJS 3.2 or older, it matters a great deal. You should definitely at least upgrade to the latest version of 3.3.x. It's really important to stay at least up to date to the latest LTS version. OJS 3.2 is no longer supported, and you'll be missing out on security updates and bug features and other things if you stay on that platform. If you're on 3.3.x and are happy with how things are, you can safely wait until 3.5 gets its LTS designation before upgrading. If you're on 3.4 and are happy, you can also wait. Once 3.5 gets LTS, you'll have a year to upgrade to 3.3.x before that stops being supported. So with that, I'm going to hand things over to Mary to talk about DataCite, and I'll be back in a bit to talk about the plugins proper.
Good stuff. Thank you, Mike. That was very interesting. So I am going to share my screen here and hopefully you can see that. Right, so hi, everybody. I'm going to talk a little bit about DataCite. I'm going to give an introduction to the organization and then talk a little bit about DOI registration, especially in the context of using a software integration like OJS. As I mentioned, yeah, we'll do an intro, a bit about DOI registration, a bit about discovery, which is a really key piece of this, and then we'll talk about DataCite membership and support. So I've only got 10 minutes, so I'm going to go quite quickly, but we will be sharing the slides and the recording of this as well. So as I'm sure some of you already know, DataCite is a global community and made up of different organizations across the research spectrum with a shared goal of ensuring that research outputs and resources are openly available and connected so that their reuse can advance knowledge across and between disciplines now and in the future. And so what is so good about DOIs? Well, in the first instance, DOIs make your research outputs discoverable. DOIs make research outputs uniquely identifiable, and the metadata that's registered alongside the DOI is stored in a central location and is harvestable by anyone. And that means that this metadata can be made available in other search engines. Alongside that, DataCite helps you to meet best practices by making research data management easy. When you can register your first DOI in less than a minute. The DataCite DOIs and metadata help to make your research fair. And we also connect you to the DataCite member community, which is full of passionate people who share experience and continue to support best practice. And finally, the DataCite metadata schema is extensive and has been adopted by other PID service providers. And finally, having a DOI for your research outputs makes tracking easier through simple interfaces, and DataCite services make institutional reporting, therefore make institutional reporting simple. And finally, DOIs support data citation and usage analytics. So if you're running a repository, these are really kind of key considerations. Currently, the DataCite community has 1,678 organizations in 64 countries. These organizations have registered more than 98 million DOIs. That's a lot. And these DOIs have been resolved 575 million times in 2025. So that's 25 resolutions per second. And a resolution is when you click on the DOI and you go to the landing page that it points to. So yeah, that was an introduction to the DataCite and the community, a brief introduction. We'll now have a look at DOI registration. So DOIs stands for Digital Object Identifier. Again, I'm sure some of you are familiar with this. It's a DOI is a type of persistent identifier, or PID. And a DOI consists of the proxy, the prefix, and the suffix. And the suffix is unique to each DOI. When you click on a DOI, you go directed to a landing page. And in the example on this slide, you see a journal from the University of Tunis, one of their landing pages that is an OJS, PKP OJS landing page. Alongside the DOI is always accompanied with a set of metadata. The metadata describes the resource and connects it to other PIDs. And when you're using the OJS DOI plugin, you will register a DOI and create an update. You can create and update the accompanying metadata as well. And yeah, just keep in mind that DOIs are for way more types of resources than just data sets and articles. You can register DOIs for thesis and dissertations, awards, and even instruments. And this slide shows, as of September 2025, how many DOIs are registered for each of the different resource types. In order to register DOIs, organizations join DataCite, either as a direct member or part of a consortium. New members can manage their accounts and contact information with their administrative member or consortium organization account. But you will also be able to create repository accounts and prefixes. And these, you can create multiple repository accounts. And these are the accounts that you use for DOI registration purposes. And it's good to keep in mind that you can register DOIs for your journal publishing platform and also for your repository platform. So if you join DataCite, or if you're already a member and you're only using registering DOIs for one of your platforms, keep in mind that you can actually use your membership to register DOIs for all the different types of research outputs that you have at your organization. So yeah, I'm highlighting here that there are these two different levels of the accounts. So when you start getting, this is significant when you start using an integration like OJS. The repository account is the only one that you can use for DOI registrations. And we get a lot of questions about this. So what I'm showing here is a little bit of information about like the repository account, basically, which is the access point for all DOI registration services. So when you get started with using the OJS DOI plugin, you need a set of repository credentials, a password, and the prefix. And with those three things, you should be able to get DOI registration up and running. There are also two environments, which is something really important to also keep in mind, because you won't be able, if you're using test, you need a separate set of credentials. And if you're using production, you'll need a different set of credentials. So basically, if you're using the OJS plugin, you will need to enter your test credentials if you're using the test environment, and you'll need to enter the production credentials if you're using production. It's not always immediately obvious, I think, because we get a lot of questions about this. So just to keep that in mind. And we work with different service providers. PKP is part of DataCite's Registered Service Providers program. And through this program, we work with organizations like PKP that have integrations with the DataCite API to ensure they meet best practices for DOI registration. These integrations allow DataCite members to register DOIs using their own credentials. And just a note on a few troubleshooting errors. So we get questions from OJS users that are receiving error messages when they try to register a DOI. And there's two things to check. Firstly, make sure you're using a repository account. That's why I was emphasizing so much in the previous slides. You can only register DOIs if you're using the repository account. And the second thing is to make sure you're using the credentials that correspond to the environment that you're working in. In terms of discoverability, I'm going to go quite quickly now. I don't want to eat too much into Mike's time, but as I mentioned before, DOIs are always accompanied by metadata. This metadata is made available through DataCite's APIs completely openly with a CC0 license. That means that the whole metadata catalog of more than 98 million DOI metadata records can be harvested by anyone. Harvesters ingest DataCite metadata and make it available through search engines and online services. These are some examples of the organizations that are currently harvesting DataCite metadata. You may recognize a few of them. This means that if you're registering DOIs and metadata, it may end up in some of these search engines and services. Okay, finally, I'm just going to talk a little bit about DataCite membership and DataCite support. There are two types of membership. You can join as a direct member or as part of a consortium. Maybe some of you already are, a member or part of a DataCite consortium. In both cases, keep in mind that you can set up multiple repository accounts to accommodate the different areas of your organization. So to give an example, if your organization joins DataCite, you could set up a DOI registration service for your journal publishing platform, the general institutional repository with theses and reports, and the specialized data repository. So that all falls under one membership. Yeah, so keep that in mind. If you're not already a member and you'd like to get started, you can ask us for a test account and we'll set you up so you can test the OJS DOI plugin. And you can also directly apply for membership by clicking on the form that I think somebody's going to share in the chat, or you can go to our website and click on the Become a Member button. And yeah, just to mention that we have a dedicated support channel for any questions from DataCite members. So if you're already a member and you have any questions at all, please get in touch. And we also have lots of information on our support site as well. So we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you so much. And please, yeah, there'll be questions at the end, but I'll happily answer questions in the chat as well. Back over to you, Mike.
Awesome, thank you. So let's talk about DOIs and configuring them in OJS. It's actually quite easy. So I'll note that everything we'll be going over in this section will be found in more detail in the PKP docs hub or in the README text files for any individual plugin in the plugin gallery in OJS. But there are links here to the DOI plugin, the Crossref manual, and the DataCite and Crossref plugins operate in very, very similar ways. There's a lot of overlap. So they're basically the same, but there is a new DataCite guide coming as soon as I have the time to write. There's also an ORCID guide, a ROAR guide, and quick submit plugins and DOIs. So quick word on installing plugins. You can view your plugins in an OJS install on the dashboard by clicking on website under the settings header on the left-hand side of the bar. The UI will look a little bit different depending on which version of the software you're using. You can view your plugins from the dashboard by clicking website under settings on the left sidebar, and you'll see these little tab sections in the main window: plugins, installed plugins, and plugin galleries. Installed plugins shows you all the plugins installed by default or added for your journal, and all compatible plugins are viewable in the plugin gallery. To install a plugin from the plugin gallery, you just click on the name of the plugin you want to install. This window will open with information about the plugin, including the GitHub repo that houses the source code. So those windows are actually really useful. You can view the source code. You can see who maintains it, which is actually really nice if you are installing a third-party plugin and want to know if it's going to be around for a while. Not all the plugins are maintained by PKP. Clicking the install button in the top right of this window will install the plugin. To do this, you will have to be a system administrator or have someone who is a system administrator who can do this for you. A regular, like an editor, won't be able to do this, but you can install your own plugins this way. Once your plugins are installed, you can enable them from the installed plugins tab. There's a checkbox on the right showing enabled status. Gray checkboxes are default plugins that you can't disable. Blue checkboxes are enabled plugins, and empty boxes are disabled plugins. Some plugins have settings. So to see your options for any individual plugin, click on the arrow to the left of the plugin name to expand it. And then you can click on the little settings link and make changes to that plugin inside. This is where you would put your credentials for the DataCite deposit plugin. For example, you would click settings and it would load your registration page. And you can update your plugins from there as well. So assigning DOIs. I want to make a distinction here between assigning and registering DOIs. This is really important. Assigning DOIs and registering DOIs with the registration agency are two different things. People often combine these two things and just call it minting. I've just minted DOIs. But if you only assign a DOI and don't register it with the DOI registration agency, it won't work. It is a very common thing to have somebody ask me why my DOIs don't work. And then I realize they don't have a membership with DataCite or Crossref. And I say, well, you've created DOIs and OJS will let you assign DOIs to anything. But if you don't have the registration part configured, then they're not going to be registered with that agency. It's more common than you might imagine. So make sure that you're a member with the registration agency and you're not just assigning and only doing that part. So let's talk about the assigning step. I'm going to start with OJS 3.3.x, which is the current LTS. No matter which DOI registration agency you have a membership with, the process of assigning DOIs is the same. In 3.3.x, you will need to start by configuring your DOI plugin. You can find the DOI plugin and its settings under the installed plugins and subheading public identifier plugins. There's a space to put your prefix here, and you'll be given a prefix by your registration agency. Sorry, I just got distracted, make sure that everything was showing up in chat properly. Yeah, so the space to put your prefix here, you'll be given a prefix by a registration agency or by your parent organization or publisher. So if you're part of a consortium, as Mary mentioned, you'll probably receive these prefixes from somebody who's managing that consortial agreement in another place. But if you're doing it individually, then you'll know your prefix by communicating direct. You can also choose which things to assign DOIs to. You might be tempted to click all of these. Honestly, I would recommend just assigning DOIs to articles. I don't know how much recall you need for the individuals, but articles is plenty. You don't need to splash out and do all three. Next are the suffixes. I more or less beg you to not think of a DOI suffix as meaning anything to readers or users. People are very tempted to fill a DOI suffix with what essentially is metadata, like the journal and the volume and the issue and the article or shorthand. They kind of treat them like bit.ly links or tiny URL links to sort of share. I would really recommend not doing that. A DOI suffix shouldn't contain metadata. They ought to be opaque. I recommend either using the default patterns here or just ignoring what they say, or creating a custom pattern with the bottom option that's even more simple than the default. OJS has an article ID, for example. It's unique in your install. It counts up every time an article is submitted. It will be unique in your system. You could just have the article ID and you would be fine. So I recommend trying to keep as much metadata as possible out of these. It leads to problems where people go like, oh, well, this actually got published to the wrong issue. And we assigned metadata saying this was part of volume 30, but actually it's part of volume 31. Can I change my DOI? That's not how DOIs work. You're not supposed to want to change DOIs. You're supposed to be assigning a persistent identifier moving forward. So please try not to put too much metadata in these. You can edit registered metadata. So if you accidentally assign the wrong DOI, that's fine. But once you register it, that cow is out of the barn, so to speak. So take typos right out of the equation. Journal and article ID is a great custom option to keep things simple. DOIs and OJS. So these are the final two options. There's these two buttons on the bottom of your settings. One says reassign DOIs and one says assign DOIs. Reassign DOIs will unassign all DOIs for your journal and reassign DOIs based on whatever your suffix settings are. If you've registered anything in your journal, never click this. It's a big, like, don't do it. Reassign DOIs is kind of for like testing and debugging and sorting these things out. I would really, unless you know exactly what you're doing, never click reassign DOIs. However, assign DOIs will assign a DOI to anything in your journal that does not already have one. So if you have a couple issues and you haven't assigned DOIs, or you want to assign DOIs to your last few issues when you get a membership, assigning DOIs this way is quite handy. I would maybe, depending on your registration agency, if let's say you have 50 years of a journal and they're all digital, assigning 50 years of DOIs at once might, not too expensive. It might be a little bit of sticker shock. So maybe not everything at once if you have a huge amount of content. But if you need to assign batch, that's the way to do it. Lastly, you can make sure a DOI will be assigned at the article level in the publication tab for any submission. So as you're working through the workflow, you have the all the peer review stuff, and you click on the publication tab. It's where you proof all of your title and abstract metadata, contributors metadata, all of these other things. And there's an identifiers tab here. You can click on identifiers in the sidebar and see the DOI information. And if something doesn't have a DOI for whatever reason, you can click assign, and it will automatically generate a DOI there based on your prefix setting. You can modify a DOI here until the work is published. Let's talk a little bit about 3.4 and 3.5. Again, no matter which DOI registration agency you have a membership with, it's the same. In 3.4 and 3.5, you'll need to start by configuring your DOI plugin. You can find the DOI plugin and its settings under installed plugins and the subheading public identifier plugins. You will also need to enable the plugin for the registration agency to which you are a member. So the DataCite plugin, the Crossfit plugin, they would both be here. You can find your DOI settings from the plugin page, or you can navigate to, and this is new in 3.4 and 3.5, under the distribution setting, there's a DOIs page there where you can set all of your DOI settings system-wide. So let's discuss these. On the left, you can see there's a registration tab. That's where you select your registration agency, and then you'll toggle automatic deposit on or off. You can fill in your user credentials, and you can also access the testing tools there if necessary. The testing credentials have their own fields in 3.4 and 3.5, and you can fill all of that stuff out. The other settings here include the DOI assignment toggle, so whether or not you're assigning DOIs at all, the DOI assignment item per type, so articles, issues, and article galleys, such as a published PDF, the prefix, and when a DOI is assigned to a work, that one in particular. So you can decide if you want the DOI to be assigned when the work goes to the copy editing stage, or when it's published, or you can tell its system to never assign a DOI automatically, and it just won't do that. New to 3.4 and 3.5 is the feature for automatically generated opaque DOIs based on a unique 8-character suffix. It's very much encouraged to use this feature to save yourself pattern-based suffix issues. I would just turn it on by default. Just click the little default button that automatically generates a unique 8-character suffix. You can also still highlight either manual suffix creation or custom patterns like you could in 3.3, but I would really recommend you do this. I will note some people don't like to do this because they say, my DOIs have always looked this way and I shouldn't change the pattern. You can absolutely change the pattern. It doesn't matter if your DOIs look the same as they always looked. It really doesn't. In OJS 3.4 and up, DOI management has been totally overhauled. So you can now find your DOI plugin settings in the left sidebar. Under distribution, you can set your prefix and suffix patterns and all of those other things from a drop-down menu. So that's the setup for each. Now we're going to talk about registration. In 3.3, you can find the registration options in the left sidebar and the dashboard by clicking Tools. And here you would choose Crossref for DataCite export registration plugins. They operate more or less the same way. Each plugin starts with the settings page with a few options and your credentials for membership. These credentials will always be your login credentials to these places, not for the OJS install. Sometimes people will say, I put in my credentials and it didn't work. And they're just putting in their own credentials on this page. Make sure it's related to your account with your registration agency. Each plugin has the same registration menu under the tab labeled Articles. It shows you article ID, author and title, issue, DOI to be registered, and the status. Active means the DOI has been registered and is resolving, which means that if somebody clicks the DOI, it takes them to the article. If your plugin is set to automatic, you can basically ignore this. It will register for you within a few hours. So sometimes people will publish and they'll go to this page and they'll go, it isn't registered yet. Just like give it a minute and it'll happen. It's sent on what's called a cron or a scheduled task. So it will happen in time and then it will show up. So just take a beat. So registering DOIs in 3.4 and 3.5. In 3.4, all DOI management and registration can be accessed from the DOIs menu in the sidebar in the top left. So you'll see it's underneath submissions, issues, announcements, and then DOIs. In 3.5, the sidebar looks like this. It's sort of a slightly different look. All DOI management here is now below issues, but before settings. And settings is a collapsible menu. So all your DOIs are managed from this DOIs tab. The DOI manager has significantly more features, including flags for DOIs that need updating when their metadata has changed. You can also assign DOIs per article here if you wish, without having to navigate to an individual publication. If I want to write in a custom DOI, I can do it from this page. You can also queue up bulk updates or bulk registrations. All this stuff is really nice for managing the DOIs in your journal. You can see that the plugin assigns labels like needs DOI for works that have yet to be assigned one. You can also see operations available as bulk actions. So if, for example, you had a bunch of DOIs in your journal And then for some reason, you moved to some other location or whatever, and you already had your DOIs updated by, say, DataCite on batch, like someone from support updated all your DOI resolutions, or you were with Crossref and you needed them supported, and you haven't updated them in OJS, you can mark them as registered. So that means something marked as registered will tell the platform that it doesn't need to assign or register that DOI for it. It's just been marked as registered. You can mark things as unregistered. You can mark them as needs think. That means something has metadata that is updated, but it hasn't yet been pushed to the registration agency. Maybe you changed a title to remove a typo, or you updated someone's affiliation metadata. Then you would need to resend that to the registration agency, and those labels will exist here. You can select all and expand all and assign DOIs. The bulk actions are really quite handy from this page. Bulk actions is where you'll be doing manual assignment and registration if you need to, and you can check the box for as many records as you need and then select the relevant bulk action. You'll also see information telling you if records have been modified and then prompt you to push up. Please remember to update your DOI registration after you make metadata changes. It's really important that the metadata that's in DataCite that goes to all of these other downstream locations is the most up-to-date metadata you can manage. Other PIDs and OJS. So there is a ROAR plugin, and ROAR is supported by the DataCite schema and the Crossref schema. In 3.3, you can find the ROAR plugin in the gallery with the name Research Organization Registry plugin. This plugin will allow for autocomplete against the ROAR API with affiliation metadata for submissions. It will also display ROAR links on article landing pages. If you're unfamiliar with ROAR, ROAR is basically PIDs for institutions. It's really handy for stuff like affiliations because it is a more reliable way of describing an institution than its like shorthand name or abbreviated name or any other number of things. It's a PID for institution. So you can navigate to the plugin gallery and install the ROAR plugin. In 3.3, ROAR metadata, I think, is only added to DataCite deposits. It's not added to Crossref deposits in 3.3. The ROAR plugin was not ported to OJS 3.4, but it was totally rewritten for 3.5. So in 3.5, you can find the ROAR plugin in the gallery with, again, the name Research Organization Registry. The plugin allows for autocomplete against the ROAR API with affiliation metadata. And for submissions, it will also display ROAR links on article pages, and you can turn it on the same way. ROAR is also in the process of being integrated into our funding metadata plugin. So if you got funding from a government agency or some other grant management place, you'll be able to put in your funding and then connect that with ROAR as well. And lastly, ORCID. ORCID has two different APIs. It has a public API, which allows any journal to pull public metadata from ORCID. In OJS, the public API facilitates authors connecting their ORCID ID to their publications. ORCID's recorded as metadata being deposited in DOI registrations with Crossref and DataCite, and author ORCIDs will be linked on article landing pages. If you have the member API, if your institution is a member, it's not easy to get a membership to ORCID. It's very expensive for just like a journal to get one. But the member API allows you to push your peer review data to ORCID and also push article records directly to ORCID as well. It's totally fine to use the public API, and you'll still get significant interaction with ORCID this way. The most important piece for authors here is to link their profile. If you're using DOIs and profiles are configured for automatic addition, works will still be added to the ORCID automatically. The member API's strongest asset is the ability to push peer review work to ORCID. That's actually pretty great. Memberships to ORCID tend to be institutional and are cheap. If you aren't concerned about automatic population of peer review work to ORCID, the public API will meet your needs plenty. So in the interest of brevity, I recommend you read the ORCID plugin documentation. It's pretty straightforward. If you're on 3.3 and you have like a multi-journal instance, like a bunch of journals in one big install of OJS, you may need access to a config file to configure ORCID. In 3.5, you can do this straight from the plugin, and there's a lot less headache. But it is very much worth the time to support your authors. I'm going to dip quickly into the section I've labeled the bonus round, unless either Kelly or Mary wave at me emphatically. Kelly knows how long this is. But I want to talk a little bit about like why this matters that your metadata is good. Forgive me for being presumptive broadly, but there's a general expectation that you want people to see the products of your hard work, and you want your work to be known and discoverable and accessible from the folks who might benefit from it, I would hope. And you probably like it to be attributed to you since you did the work, or since the implications of its value have some impact on your career or the careers of your authors. And it's possible this may seem weird because depending on where you are in your career, you're maybe not used to doing this. After all, the most of the experience of dissemination as a student, for example, for early career people, is submitting a paper to one person who grades them. And it's certainly fine if this is the case, it's very normal, but plenty of established researchers don't think too hard about where or how their work is shared either. For students, this is what disseminating your research looks like. You read a publication, you get an idea, you write your paper assignment, and you move on with your life. Submitting a work in the sort of open science life cycle is this much more circular pattern of open proposals, community engagement, work getting published, iterations of work getting published, things being shared to a variety of locations, and knowledge mobilization related to that research. Submitting your work as a modern academic kicks off this sort of enormous Rube Goldberg machine of scholarly publishing infrastructure. So earlier, Mary alluded to, you publish and your metadata ends up downstream. Anytime you publish your journal, you hit that publish button, that metadata starts to go to a bunch of places, which is why it's important that you get it right. We're talking stuff like data and articles, preprints, presentations, proceeding, countless other things. Your work is going to end up in a lot of places, often without you even really being aware of it. Where do the products of research go? The perception is, I think a lot of folks don't really think too much about how publishing works. We know a few things happen. Let's say I'm talking to researchers, you submit an article, articles undergo peer review, works are published. The people who want to read these works can get to them. Things will get cited. The number of citations is very important. The number of citations is directly correlated with where you publish. OA might be required somehow. This is what it's like for me to talk to researchers in the open access space at my library. This isn't wrong per se, but it's definitely not the whole story. So we're going to go through a couple examples here where every green plus you see is potentially a new DOI for your work in the wild. So let's say I've got some researchers, we submit to a journal that goes to peer review. The version of record is published, and that information is pushed to my ORCID, and the version of record has a DOI. It's very straightforward, very clean cut. Then there's another example where I publish to a journal and it goes to peer review, and the accepted manuscript is self-archived into a repository that generates a DataCite DOI. And then the version of record is published, and then that goes to ORCID. So here are two DOIs being created, one in the DataCite repository and one as the version of record is published. And we have the reality here is that publishing is more iterative and tied to a wider range of accessible outputs than it's ever been. Submission still happens, but users might post their work in a preprint server before peer review, or funder mandate might require open access or at least a version of the work to be accessible. If you're publishing in a major subscription journal, lots of people can't read your work, and data management might require publication of the data set. Ultimately, you could end up in a situation where you publish a preprint that goes to archive and it's in a repository that does DataCite DOIs and another repository that does Crossref DOIs. And then it's on a web page. And then you submit it to a journal where the accepted manuscript is put into PubMed and another repository has a handle. And then a data set goes out and then something pushed to OpenAir. And then the accepted manuscript's in a repository using Share Your Paper or in Zenodo. And the data set's in Zenodo and it's in Dataverse. And then you have a version of record and then you have the ID. And now we're talking about each of these things having a DOI with many more that are automatically created. So your metadata is just going. These are all places your metadata can and will go. If you jam the editors or editors, the into a name field for something that doesn't have an actual author, guess where that will end up? And as a fun thing, you should search Google Scholar for editors, the, for the number of articles people have just said, well, I need an author for this because the metadata field's here. I'll put in editors, the, and there's a ton of these. If you manage a journal, you're standing at the nozzle of a metadata fire hose, and it's good to think about where this goes and what it means for you. This is important for journals, and it's important for authors. Authors will know what they worked on, for example, but people, researchers, funders, institutions, employers looking for their work might not. Maybe they share a name with another researcher, or the results are always commingled, or their field only uses first name initials in the metadata. Maybe they change their name for any number of incredibly valid reasons, and it's painful or unpleasant that their old publications require others to know it. Unless your name is wildly unique and accurate, reliable attribution can definitely be a problem. Citation styles like API aren't equipped to deal with the varieties in both human identity and how modern research is shared. Even this method, the student method, required a student number, right? To grade your work and push your work through. We used a persistent identifier to do grading for students, but often we don't think about this stuff. For authors, publishing real scholarship. All researchers need to talk about the work they've done, often, repeatedly, and all researchers benefit from clear and unambiguous attribution and metadata. Persistent identifiers and the connections they expose aid dramatically in the discovery, dissemination, and attribution of all of these disparate products of research. Is it not remarkable that I am still talking? This has been frankly an astounding amount of content. I'd like to congratulate you for enduring it. It's okay. I'm comfortable with myself. Please refer to this deck whenever you need to. Please also read our documentation. Thank you. And with that, I am done.
Thank you so much, Mike, and thank you, Mary. That was an astounding amount of content and very informative. Really appreciate it. We have a few questions in the Q&A. I'll start with the first one from Stephanie. Stephanie asks, I'm a sysadmin for several OJS instances using OJS 3.3.08. Although journals have indicated automated registration, it seems to fail a lot, and I have to go in and manually register many DOIs. Is this a common issue, and is there anything I can do to prevent this?
I feel like without knowing what the error says, it's kind of hard to say. One of the things about troubleshooting DOI issues is like someone just says like, I got an error. Often, like with Crossref, for example, we have a very common problem where a person just put their password in wrong, or they have a white space on the other side of the password and they keep telling me their plugin isn't working, but actually their credentials just aren't recorded right. Usually you get like a 403 or a 404 error, and it's just the API trying to reach the other side and it's not working. So that's one potential option. I would recommend hopping onto the support forum, posting your problem, posting screenshots of the errors you get, and there somebody can help you specifically say, yeah, this is the issue that you're running into. That's what I would recommend, because without knowing exactly what's happening with your setup or system, it can be hard to tell from a distance.
Great, thank you. Yeah. And so I guess next question we have is from Julia Katarina. Could you please explain again the point about ORCID registration and 3.4 or 3.5?
Yeah, I believe in both 3.4 and 3.5. ORCID registration is as simple as setting up the plugin. And I know one of PKP's developers is on this call. Hi, Caitlin. And she already sent me one correction. So if I'm wrong about this, she will let me know. So you set up the plugin there, you put in your API credentials, and it works that way. But in 3.3, if you have multiple journals and you set up the credential with the config file, you have to set it up at like the system level. And there's a configuration file that, yeah, Caitlin's saying no ORCID plugin needed in 3.5. Yeah, it's built into core. So you can just hop in and make your changes. So yeah, in 3.3, it's a system config file that includes your credentials for ORCID. And then what ends up happening is if you have a bunch of journals on one system, you've kind of turned ORCID on for everybody, but not everybody may want it. So you kind of have to let your journals know that there are individual things that you need to toggle on or off if you don't want to have ORCID included. It just requires a little bit more sort of fussy setup through the configuration file and a system administrator who has access to it. That's not something you can get from the UI, for example. You have to log in to the back end to make changes to a config file. So a little bit more fussy in 3.3 to set that stuff up, and a little bit more complicated if a bunch of journals are sharing one API key across all of their installs. So, but that's all covered in the documentation in the Docs Hub now.
Okay, great, excellent, thank you. Just gonna mark those as answered. So we have a couple questions about, okay, so we have one question about suffix assignment, asking if the unique 8-character DOI suffix is available in 3.3.
No, it is not. So at best, I would recommend a custom pattern that has as little stuff in it as possible. And the hosting team, typically what I do is I use like the journal abbreviation. Sometimes suffixes have like what people call like a shoulder. It's very common for like Dataverse, for example, to have like a small institutional shoulder that sort of precedes the DOI as part of the DOI suffix. So maybe the journal abbreviation and then the article ID, and that's it. That's what I would recommend. Keep it nice and brief and custom. And then when you upgrade, turn on that. It's actually based, I think, on code written by somebody at DataCite. The cool DOIs code, I think, is where we started the opaque generation. So yeah, I'd turn that on as soon as you hit 3.4 if you do.
Great, yeah, definitely we want to encourage those opaque suffixes wherever possible. Okay, so we're getting a lot of questions. And also if you are adding questions to the chat, if you could please add it to the Q&A, that just helps us keep track as we're going here. I'll just keep going through. Another one about 3.3, this one is the DOI automatically assigned to a submission has the wrong prefix. Would I simply change the prefix in the DataCite DOI plugin settings? Can I change it back afterwards?
can, yes. This sometimes happens if you've like moved from one provider to another, or you left a major publisher and you had a DOI, and then you get your own membership with your own prefix, but you want to update your old. It can kind of you can hop in the time machine a little bit. So yeah, if you hop into your settings and change to the previous prefix, register that content, and then put your current prefix back in, you can update it from there. It kind of remains a frustrating bit about sort of time hopping this way, that there's sort of one prefix sort of stamped to an article. So yeah, just be careful if you're submitting submitting DOIs for old content, and if you change it, please remember to change it back. You won't, your DOIs for the old suffix won't register anyway. You'll get errors thrown back at you because you can't write to that prefix anymore. But it's still good practice to double check. Otherwise, could be creating a bunch of new DOIs for stuff that already had them, and then you'll get conflict reports or other things of that kind.
Great, thank you. Yeah, definitely makes sense. Okay. I think this is a question for Mary. So what are the best practices for assigning DOIs to very large data sets? So for example, 100 plus terabytes of atmospheric data split across thousands of files. Should DOIs be minted at the dataset collection level rather than for individual files? And does DataCite provide guidance on the appropriate level of granularity?
Good question. So I guess there's different approaches, and we leave it quite open to the members to decide what level of granularity. So you can use as many DOIs as you need, and you can link DOIs to other DOIs in the metadata. So if you have, for example, a DOI that you will allocate as the collection DOI, you may want to have thousands of files connected to that collection DOI. So that someone could decide if they want to cite the collection or if they want to cite a particular file. So I think it's good to view it in terms of citation. So at what level of granularity does it make sense for somebody to cite this? And in terms of documentation, there is some documentation about this in the schema, which I think somebody could share in the chat. But if you want to share more information about your use case with us, we'd love to hear more about that. And like if you're currently, what your current kind of setup is, and what would be, useful in terms of guidance. Because as I say, at the moment we have so many different types of members working with so many different types of data. I would be reluctant to say anything too concrete about that, but yeah, I hope that's helpful, and the documentation's in the chat, I think. And Kelly, I don't know if you want to add anything.
I'm gonna add to the chat. So we have the ability to link DOIs together with related identifiers, and so I think if you are choosing to register those file level DOIs, I'm making sure that they're linked to the parent with an is part of relationship. So I'll just put that in directly. That's really the key thing, just to make sure that it's clear what the structure is there for discoverability. Right. Okay, another OJS question, as we are in the OJS webinar, for 3.4/3.5, does assign bulk option not only assign, as in set the suffix for the article, but also always register the DOI with DataCite or Crossref, i.e. is it minting?
Yes. So in 3.4 and 3.5, the way it works is you can set the plugin to automatically assign DOIs or not. And then once they're assigned, they go into that scheduled task for registration. So you don't have a register me button the way you did in 3.3. Basically, it's been assigned, you wait a tick, and then it's been updated appropriately. So you kind of queue those things up. In part, this was because sometimes people would submit, say, 25 to 40 DOIs at once, so you had a really big issue. And if they all go at the same time, because we can't guarantee everybody's server environment is the same, OJS would time out trying to send an enormous amount of volume to these places. So now everything's set to scheduled tasks. And it's basically a queue, and it just works its way through all of those over time, which is, I think, better for sort of batch stuff, but it means you're not clicking a register button. You assign the DOI and then everything else is there and you just kind of wait for it to go. The plugin is set so that either happens at the copy editing phase or whatever, but yeah, you can just sit. So once everything's been assigned, give it a minute and then hop in. That's the recommendation.
Great, thank you. So, okay, we have one question on the ORCID public API. Can I create for several journals? I think another configuration question there.
Yeah, you can. The ORCID API would be set up for your install, and well, actually, that'd probably be a good question for ORCID. It's like if you have one API key and you're using it on a bunch of disparate installs, does that count as using your API key? Because I think when you have a member API and an institution of basic membership, you get 5 API keys. And I don't know what happens when you have a bunch of journals that you've configured individually and you've used that API key for every one of them. That would be an excellent question for ORCID support. I'm not entirely sure. Double check. John says you can reuse that API key, and John knows what he's talking about. So yes, you can reuse your API key. Thanks, John.
Great. Yeah, thank you. And thank
Tell
you,
these
John.
allies in the chat the rules.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah. All right, we've got just a few minutes left. A couple more questions. Thanks for answering all of these. So, which DataCite metadata schema is OJS 3.5 release compliant with?
You know what? I saw this question pop up in the chat and I have no idea. I'm going to assume that whatever was the most recent one at the point of release, because our developer, Bojana Bokan, would have made sure that that was the case. So that's going to be my guess. And someone from DataCite can tell me if I'm wrong about that. But I don't think I am.
I should know that. But so it's going to be somewhere between 4.4 and 4.6. I know at least 4.4 is supported. And for our minor versions, they are backward compatible. So yeah, whenever new versions of OJS come out, it should not be too onerous to continue to update to support the additional features that we're adding.
Caitlin in the chat saying the latest schema version 4 from looking
yeah,
at
the latest of 4, so
Caitlin.
it'd be 4.6 then. Yeah, great. Thank you, Caitlin. Yeah. I know the OJS team is really on top of making those updates happen, so I will mark that on. Okay. And then if I set up a new data service node at my institute, can it mint DOIs under our existing institutional DataCite membership, or would it require a separate sub-membership? I can answer this quick. It would be, if it's within your institution, that can be part of your existing membership. You can create more repository accounts as needed for different purposes within your organization. And then last question that we have time for here. Is it correct that DOIs are only registered when an article is published? So hitting the publish button is the prompt for auto registration.
I believe so, yes. You can, the DOI plugin will assign them at the copy editing or publishing stage, and you can pick where it gets assigned. I think it gets registered on publication.
Amazing, thank you. All right, so that was rapid fire round of questions. I just want to thank our presenters very much for all of this really informative content and for engaging with us. Yeah, thanks everyone for joining. We will have the recording and slides shared afterwards. And yeah, thanks so much and have a great rest of your day, everyone. Take care.